our culture today is trying to completely demasculate all of the young men in our culture. I mean, you can look at the testosterone levels in young men today, and they are lower than throughout all of history. And there's a lot of reasons for this that we can get into later. But my friends, they're trying to demasculate the young men in this country because they don't want people who are going to stand up. And so I'm telling you, all of you moms here, the people who I said were the most vicious in our movement, if you are raising a young man, please raise them to be a monster.
So right-wingers love their conspiracy theories, that's pretty obvious at this point, and there's one common thread that you tend to always see with a lot of these conservatives. They are afraid that somehow society isn't manly enough anymore, and they're very terrified about this fact, which is hilarious on a lot of different fronts, but it's also very important to remember that what these people are saying is unbelievably dangerous. First and foremost, we have to address the fact that this is a pretty overtly fascist talking point. Since the dawn of fascism, they've been creating this narrative of this conspiracy of making the world less masculine and taking away men's power in society. And so it's not surprising to see a bunch of right-wingers in the United States say that same thing. But needless to say, you've got these reactionaries that are very upset about it. They think that being manly means being hateful, means being tough. And that means, you know, causing a scene, disregarding other people's feelings, not being aware of your surrounding or how much everybody really doesn't like you being around. You know, ignoring all of those things and just being your own individual at the expense of literally everybody else. That's why, even though they're coughing up a storm spreading coronavirus all over the place, these Republicans just can't figure out how to put a mask on. Be too much of an impediment to their personal freedoms. Because in their mind, they're the main character that's too tough to ever really get coronavirus, which is a completely, utterly nonsensical thing to believe. But here's how what they're saying is dangerous. And it all goes back to something, and get ready to get mad about this, because I'm going to use a phrase, you're going to get really mad about it, okay? It goes back to toxic masculinity. Now, toxic masculinity is a very obvious byproduct of capitalism. Capitalism thrives on people being selfish and hyper-individualistic, especially when it comes at the expense of other people. Capitalism needs people to be in a mindset to dehumanize others in order to thrive, because how else do you get large portions of the population to ignore the reality of homelessness and hunger? So capitalism really incentivizes this hyper-individualistic mindset that is very overtly violent, something that's used to bolster imperialist ambitions, and fundamentally based on individual men having ownership of the social domains around them, especially when it comes to family life. And this toxic masculinity leads to a lot of problems. It leads to men thinking that they own the women around them. It leads to men thinking they can do whatever they want without consequences. All of these things are wrapped up in this hyper-individualistic, violent ideology that is toxic masculinity. Now, that's not to say that masculinity in and of itself is a bad thing. This is one thing that's very important not to get confused. There's nothing wrong with being a loving father, a supportive brother, or an ambitious son. All of these things are perfectly fine. What's not fine, however, is when you define your own masculinity around how much you cause harm to other people around you. Now, this person, to be clear, is telling people that they should raise their children to be monsters. So he even goes a step further, doubling down on this, and I bet he would be outraged about me using the phrase toxic masculinity while unironically saying that he thinks men should be monsters. But what kind of monsters do these right-wing viewpoints produce? People like this, and like this, and like this. These are the kinds of monsters that these right-wingers seem to think that their children should grow up to be. This guy is saying that you should look up to those monsters, and that you should intentionally raise your children to be monsters like that. We need to be very clear. The right wing in America has completely detached itself from any connection to society at large. All these right wingers seem to think that they are John Rambo, everyone's magically out to get them, and there's some super individualistic person that can survive out in the wilderness by themselves. Now, we know this isn't true because they will literally throw a tantrum if they're not allowed to harass a waitress, but the fact that they think it is a good thing to be some sort of violent individualistic person, the fact that they are willing to say, yes, your kid should be a monster, is very, very alarming, because it shows an absolute disregard for the humanity of anybody else in the world. And that is fundamentally what this is about. Toxic masculinity is about having the privilege to disregard everyone's thoughts around you and then acting based off of that reality. acting in such a way where you don't take into consideration the thoughts and feelings of other people around you. This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain on the Young Turks Twitch channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with my content.